Imagine picking up a sword, right? But instead of it being forged from steel or iron, the sharp edge is made entirely of, like, mathematical truth.
Right, which is a wild concept to even try to visualize.
Yeah, exactly. And the dull edge, the back of the blade, is made of mathematical falsehood. So you are holding this weapon where the physical form itself is dictated purely by multidimensional computer logic.
It's completely mind-bending.
It really is. And today, we are staring at a blueprint that attempts to do exactly that. We are doing a deep dive into a highly complex cipher. It's essentially this schematic landscape that maps Boolean logic, literal true and false statements, alongside, spatial geometry, arrays of numbers, and color theory.
And it maps all of that onto the physical architecture of a conceptual weapon.
Right. So, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. The source material refers to this as a holistic elemental architecture, and our mission today is to decode this system.
Which is quite the mission, I have to say.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to translate these dense matrices, these spatial coordinates, and this highly symbolic language into, like, a clear, fascinating mental model for you.
We should acknowledge right up front that this document, at first glance, feels entirely alien.
Oh, yeah. When I first opened the file, I was completely overwhelmed. It looks like the source code of the universe just got dumped into a spreadsheet.
I completely understand that reaction, because when you normally look at structural engineering, say, a floor plan for a house, you rely on a certain spatial comfort.
Right, like a heavy black line means a load-bearing wall.
Exactly. It's binary, it is visible, and it is firmly rooted in 2 dimensions. But this blueprint breaks that spatial comfort entirely.
It really does.
It operates in these architectural muddy waters, essentially replacing static lines with intersecting variables. You are just bombarded with intersecting symbols, literal color mappings, and mathematical weights that seem arbitrary.
Until you learn how to read the grammar of the system, right?
Precisely. And I assure you, by breaking down the logic gates, by meticulously establishing the spatial coordinates, the underlying beauty of this system is going to emerge. Every single color, every number, and every conceptual jewel listed in this text has an exact, rigorous purpose.
Okay, so let's start at the absolute foundation, because before we can even attempt to visualize this sword, we really need to understand the space it occupies.
We have to build the empty room first.
Exactly. And the text gives us 8 specific spatial nodes to build from. It lists them as N0 degrees 12, E90 degrees 3, S180 degrees 6, and W270 degrees 9.
Let's unpack those coordinates, because they are a brilliant hybridization of 2 systems we already use every single day.
Right, because I see the compass directions, north, east, south, west,
Right.
and I see the degrees of a circle, the 0, 90, 180, 270. But what are the 12, 3, 6, and 9 at the end of those strings? Like
Well-
N0 degrees 12. Are those secondary dimensions?
Well, think about a clock face. Where's the 12 located?
At the very top, like dead center.
Right. And where's north on a standard map?
Top, dead center. Oh, wow, I see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And east is at 90 degrees, which corresponds to the 3 o'clock position on a clock. South is 180 degrees, the 6 o'clock position. West is 270 degrees, the 9 o'clock position.
So the author of this holistic elemental architecture is layering a 360-degree navigational compass over a 12-hour temporal orientation.
That's exactly what's happened.
But that is incredibly specific. I mean, why not just use one or the other? Why do we need both the compass and the clock?
Because we are dealing with a multi-dimensional object. A compass only gives you a flat 2-dimensional plane on the ground.
Right, like looking down at a map.
Yeah. And a clock face gives you a vertical orientation like on a wall. By combining them, saying north is definitively tied to the vertical 12 position, the blueprint anchors this highly abstract Boolean geometry into physical, human navigational terms.
It tells the builder exactly how this object sits in 3-dimensional space.
Precisely. It locks it in.
Okay, that makes total sense. So we have our space mapped out, now we had to populate it. And the text introduces the fundamental building blocks of this universe through a system it calls the 3-bit triad decoder.
This is really the engine of the entire architecture.
Yeah, and in traditional computer science, a 3-bit system just means you have 3 distinct variables, right? We can call them A, B, and C.
Yes. And because it's Boolean logic, each of those variables can only exist in one of 2 states, true or false.
A 1 or a 0.
Correct.
Okay.
So because you have 3 variables and each has 2 possible states, you get exactly 8 possible mathematical combinations. 2 to the power of 3 is 8.
Right. So you start at 0, 0, move to 0, 0, 1, 0, 10, and so on, all the way up to 111.
Exactly. We have 8 mathematical combinations.
And earlier, we just laid out 8 spatial nodes, 4 at the top of the weapon, 4 at the bottom.
And this is where the author does something truly innovative. They don't just leave it as dry computer science on a chalkboard. They map this 3-bit logic onto a 3-dimensional color wheel.
They turn binary states into a spatial visual map. Yes.
Hold on, though. You're losing me a bit. You're saying a Boolean false is a color. How does that work visually?
Let's walk through the variables, which the text refers to as literals. We have the A literal, the B literal, and the C literal. Let's look at the A literal first. The text dictates that a true state, or A, is represented by the color purple. Specifically, it names it bottom purple 3.
And the false state, like not A?
The false state is represented by yellow. The text calls it top yellow.
Okay, so the A literal gives us a vertical axis. We have yellow at the top, representing a Boolean 0, and purple at the bottom, representing a Boolean 1.
Precisely. Now let's map the B literal. The true state is green, designated as back left green 4.
And the false state?
The false state is red, designated as front right red 1.
So our B literal cuts diagonally through the space. Front right is false, back left is true.
You're tracking perfectly.
Right.
And finally, we have the C literal. The true state is orange, called back right orange 5. The false state is blue, front left blue 2. Let me try to picture this for a second. It's like a 3D RGB color mixer.
That's a good way to look at it.
But instead of just combining light on a computer screen to make a new hex code, intersecting these colors generates an entirely new physical location in multidimensional space.
Let's test that analogy. Let's take the absolute baseline state,
Yeah.
the Boolean 0, 0, 0.
Thousand fonts means false, false, false. Not A, not B, not C. So we need the 3 false colors.
Right.
Not A is yellow, not B is red, not C is blue.
So the text states that the intersection of those 3 specific Boolean values, yellow, red, and blue, generates a physical spatial node named a Lujrex.
Lujrex, okay.
It places a Lujrex at the specific coordinate of S 180 degrees 6.
So the absolute 0 state of the weapon lives at the 6 o'clock position on the southern pole.
Exactly. Now let's flip the entire system to its absolute maximum state, 111.
True, true, true.
Yes.
That would mean taking the true colors. A is purple, B is green, C is orange. The text says purple intersecting green intersecting orange gives us the node Luclaz. And Luclaz sits at the exact same geographic coordinate, S 180 degrees 6.
Yes, but on the opposite vertical pole. A Lujrex is the false anchor. Luclaz is the true anchor.
Oh, wow.
You see the symmetry here. The Boolean logic perfectly dictates the spatial geometry. You are mapping conceptual truth onto physical coordinates.
I want to look really closely at one specific mid-state, because this is where the implications of this system really start to show themselves. Let's look at the 011 node.
011, okay, that translates to false, true, true.
Right. Not A, which is yellow, true B, which is green, true C, which is orange.
Yellow intersecting green intersecting orange.
Yeah, and the text explicitly tells us this combination creates the node DALX, and DALX is located at N0 degrees 12. Dead north at the 12 o'clock position.
Correct.
So why is this specific mathematical mapping so essential to the overall holistic elemental architecture? Like, why go through all this trouble?
Because we are not just building a cloud of colored points floating in a void. We are building a structured, physical object, a conceptual weapon. The 3-bit triad decoder establishes the irrefutable anchor points of that reality.
Because you can't have geometry without form.
Exactly. If Neolix wasn't precisely defined by the specific, inescapable interaction of yellow, green, and orange, the structural integrity of the entire sword would collapse before it is even forged.
It would just fall apart.
Right. Think of the colors as the DNA, the Boolean values as the proteins, and these named nodes, Neolix, Luclaz, Lujrex, as a resulting skeletal structure.
That raises a huge question for me, though. We have these colored nodes suspended in Boolean space, but a sword can't just be a constellation of floating dots.
No, it can't.
How does the blueprint actually manifest them into something you can hold? How does it cross the boundary from computer math to physical matter?
This is exactly where the source material transitions into what it calls the detailed disclosure description. This phase of the blueprint is where the abstract suddenly becomes incredibly tangible.
It gets real.
Yeah, it gives us very precise, almost mechanical construction instructions.
I'm going to read this directly from the source, actually, because the phrasing is wild. It says, the grip emerges the pommel 3DGR jewel's top yellow, traverse distance, and impales bottom purple 3 of the hilt 3DGR jewel.
Let's visualize that carefully. You have a pommel, right? The counterweight at the very bottom of the weapon.
Right.
Its top point is yellow.
Which we establish is our false aliteral, the top yellow.
Right. From that Boolean 0, that yellow point, the grip of the sword emerges. It travels a specific mathematical gap called the traverse distance moving upward, and it physically impales the bottom of the hilt.
And what color is the bottom of the hilt?
Bottom purple 3, which is our true aliteral.
Notice the polarity there.
Exactly. The traverse distance is bridging the yellow top of the pommel to the purple bottom of the hilt. Yellow and purple are our A variables. Together, they form the central axis, the absolute structural spine of the weapon.
Wait, I have to push back here for a second. You're saying a 0 and a 1 create a physical grip. That makes no sense to me.
I know, it's counterintuitive.
Because Boolean logic lives in a processor. It represents a state of electrical current, not physical space. How does this blueprint bridge the gap between a computer 0 and a physical piece of metal I can wrap my hand around?
It requires a massive shift in how you define space. In this holistic elemental architecture, space isn't just an empty container where objects sit. Space is logic.
Space is logic.
Yeah. The traverse distance isn't a piece of metal bolted between 2 points. It is the spatial extrusion of a state change.
The spatial extrusion of a state change, what does that actually mean?
It means the physical act of moving from false to true is the grip.
Oh, wow.
Imagine holding a concept. The pommel is a definitive no. The hilt is a definitive yes. The physical space between them, the journey from no to yes, generates a field of tension.
Right.
And in this architecture, that tension is so mathematically absolute that it manifests as physical geometry. You aren't holding metal, you are holding the mathematical transition between yellow and purple.
So it's literally a grip made of argument.
You could say that, yeah.
That is wild. And it goes further because out of that true state at the hilt, the blade itself is born. The text says, there is a sword emerging from the center, the top yellow of the hilt 3D-GR jewel.
And here is where our 3-bit decoded nodes return to dictate the shape of the weapon. The blade isn't just like a generic triangular extrusion.
Right.
It is constructed entirely from the specific multidimensional intersections we decoded earlier.
Right. The text assigns specific roles to the nodes. The true edge blade is located at Nalix. The flats of the blade, the broad flat sides, are located at the Thedlorio and Vadrant. And the false edge block, the blunt back of the sword, is located at Alushrex.
Look at the deliberate arrangement of those mathematical values. Do you remember the Boolean values for the true edge blade at Nalix?
Yeah, we just did that one. Nalix is 011, false, true, true.
And what about the false edge block at Alushrex?
Alushrex is 0000, all false. Oh, I see what they did there.
You got it.
Is the true edge a literal pun on Boolean true values?
Given the extreme rigor of this document, it is highly likely that this is an intentional, deeply embedded layer of meaning. It's a structural pun.
That is amazing.
Right. The sharpest, most active, most dangerous part of the weapon, the edge meant to cut, is heavy with true variables. It is packed with the energy of green and orange.
Because 011 has 2 true literals.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the dull blocking edge of the weapon, the part meant to absorb impact rather than deal it, is entirely devoid of true values. It is the absolute zero state. It is mathematically inert.
For you listening at home, just imagine what it would feel like to swing a physical manifestation of the equation yellow and green and orange.
It's a crazy thought experiment.
You are striking something with a concentration of mathematical truth. And the flat sides of the blade, the parts that catch the light but don't cut, are at Thedlario and Vadrant,
Which correspond to the Boolean states of 001 and 010.
Ah, okay.
They are the transitional states. They sit physically and mathematically halfway between the absolute false back and the highly true front edge. The physical geometry of the blade perfectly mirrors a logic gate transitioning from 0 to 1.
Okay, so we have the spatial nodes mapped. We have the true and false edges of the blade defined. We have the pommel and the hilt connected by that tension field between purple and yellow.
We have basic shape.
But a sword can't just be an abstract concept of tension, right? If you strike something with the true edge blade, that kinetic energy has to go somewhere. How does the blueprint bind these Boolean points together so the whole thing doesn't just shatter into raw data when you use it?
That structural necessity brings us to the next massive phase of the text, the complex network fundament. We have to move past the physical nodes themselves and examine the interstitial geometry.
The network of bridges connecting everything together.
Exactly.
Because the source material provides a massive list of 24 specific pairings or connections between these named nodes, and they have names that sound almost mystical, like Zaith, Slith, Nazria.
But reading through them, they represent pure, unyielding structural logic. If we go back to your earlier realization about the nodes being a constellation, these 24 bridges are the lines of gravity drawn between the stars to hold the picture together.
Oh, I like that.
In network theory, they are the edges connecting the vertices.
I actually look at it like a transit map. If these multidimensional nodes, Aludrex, Nullucix, Thadlorio, are subway stations, these words are the exact train lines connecting them.
That's a perfect analogy.
Because you can't just teleport from one side of the sword to the other, you have to travel the logic path.
Let's trace a few of those routes to see how the architecture handles stress.
Okay, let's start at the blunt back of the sword, the false edge block at Aludrex. The text says Aludrex is connected to the sharp front, Nulix, and that bridge is called Zath.
Think about what traveling the Zath line means mathematically. Aludrex is 0, 0. Yalix is 0, 11. The bridge, called Zath, represents a highly specific, volatile state change. You are moving from a state of total multidimensional falsehood to a state where two variables suddenly spike to true.
That is a massive jump.
Exactly. That requires a massive structural leap across the geometry of the sword. The Zath line is the reinforced logic pathway that allows the back of the sword to support the front of the sword without collapsing under the mathematical contradiction.
That makes perfect sense. So if Zath connects the back to the front, what connects the sides? The text says Thadlorio is connected to Slarniok via Slith, Luklas is connected to Slarniok via Nosria, and then we have Nullucix connected to Leklas via Vub.
Notice the density of the network radiating from certain central nodes. The sharp edge, Nullucix, doesn't just connect to the back.
Right, it connects to a bunch of things.
It connects to the flat side vadrant via a line called Ovrix. It connects to the other flat side, Thadlorio, via Jiva.
It feels like the sharp edge is anchoring multiple high-tension wire lines, pulling the rest of the logic toward it.
And that is why taking the Vub line, the connection between Yalix and Luklas, is so structurally necessary. You asked earlier how the sword absorbs kinetic energy without shattering.
Right.
The network is completely interconnected. The sword isn't fragile because any stress placed on the 011 true edge blade is immediately distributed across Ovrixes, Vub, Jiva, Soths, and down into the 111 absolute true anchor of Luklas.
So it is an infinitely stable, multidimensional object because the Boolean logic naturally cross-braces itself.
Precisely. Every 1 and 0 is structurally supported by a web of mathematical compromises. The complex network fundament is an exercise in perfect tension.
Okay, so we've built the scaffolding, we know the nodes, we know the edges, we know the transit lines holding it all together, but now we have to look deeper.
We have to look inside the materials themselves.
Yeah, we are transitioning to a section called the Reforged Rhetoric Refactor.
Up until now, we've been looking at the macro architecture. The Reforged Rhetoric Refactor takes us down to the atomic level of the weapon. It examines the internal properties, the underlying mathematical weights that determine the physical, localized states of the sword's literal surface area, which the text refers to as joules or facets.
So we're moving from the subway map down to the literal atomic weight of the steel, or, well, in this case, the mathematical weight of the logic.
Exactly.
And the text breaks down 4 fundamental property equations. It assigns each of them a color, a state name, and a symbol.
Let's lay those 4 foundational states out because they govern everything that follows.
First, we have white, which the text terms inverted 1, symbolized by a white heart icon. Second, we have black, termed orientation wote, symbolized by a black heart. Third, we have brown, termed unbound, symbolized by a brown heart. And fourth, we have double brown, termed either inverted 1 or orientation white, symbolized by a small concentric circle or button icon.
These 4 states, white, black, brown, and double brown, are the physical realities that the colored facets of the sword can experience at any given microsecond. And to explain how they work, the text provides exact additive arrays for how these states manifest across the 4 horizontal colored facets we identified earlier. Front right red 1, front left blue 2, back left green 4, and back right orange 5.
I'm going to read these numerical arrays out loud because sitting with these numbers reveals a massive story about the structural integrity we were just discussing.
It really does. It's like reading the genetic code of the weapon.
Let's look at the white or inverted 1 state. The text lists its array as front right red 1 equals 5 plus 8 plus 7 plus 4 plus 4 plus 8 plus 6 plus 5.
Stop there for a moment and just count the integers. 5, 8, 7, 4, 4, 8, 6, 5.
There are exactly 8 integers being added together.
And what else do we have exactly 8 of in this holistic elemental architecture?
The 8 spatial nodes. Aludrex, Thadlorio, Vadrant, Nullucix, Slarniok, Brilith, Omvartis, Leklas.
Precisely. The mathematical weight of the white state on the red facet isn't a random number.
It's connected.
It is a direct aggregate sum of its relationship to the 8 spatial nodes. It calculates the gravitational pull of every single point on the compass. It is a profoundly holistic system. Everything touches everything else.
That is absolutely mind-bending, because the text also lists the white state for the blue facet. Front left blue 2 equals 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 4 plus 5 plus 3 plus 6. So it's a completely different distribution of weight, but it's still pulling from all 8 nodes.
And if you look at the black state, orientation 0, the numbers are similarly healthy. The red facet array is 6 plus 7 plus 5 plus 4 plus 5 plus 4 plus 2, 2.
Yes.
And the brown state, unbound, shows the same thing. You have vibrant distributions of numbers ranging from 1 to 10 across all the facets, representing constant active hum of mathematical energy.
But then we get to double brown, and this is the section I was staring at for an hour before we started recording.
The double brown anomaly. What's fascinating here is the stark contrast it provides.
Yeah.
Double brown represents the state of either inverted 1 or orientation arrow. The text specifically defines it a few paragraphs later as the secondary binding structure, and its numerical arrays are shocking compared to the other 3 states.
I want you all to really hear the difference here. We just heard arrays full of 5s, 8s, and 7s. Listen to the secondary binding structure for front right red 1. It is 0 plus 0 plus 3 plus 3 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1.
It's almost entirely dead space.
It's an absolute void. And front left blue 2 is similarly barren. 0 plus 0 plus 3 plus 1 plus 0 plus 1 plus 0 plus 1. It is just 0 after 0 after 0. Absolute silence on this side of the sword.
Mathematically, it acts as a massive dampener. It is a state of near absolute inertia.
Why would a sword need inertia?
Because it is the structural glue that stops the vibrant, humming energy of the white, black, and brown states from vibrating the weapon apart. The secondary binding structure is quiet, heavy, and dormant, except in one highly specific, highly volatile location.
Right. This is the mystery that makes this document so captivating. Let's look at the double brown state for the green facet. Back left green 4.
Let's hear it.
The array reads 0 plus 1 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 2, 13.
In a sea of zeros and anemic ones, suddenly, bam, we have a massive localized spike of 13.
A huge spike of mathematical weight. Why is there a random 13 buried in a sea of zeros? It's like finding a sudden, deliberate, highly engineered mutation in a strand of DNA.
It really is.
What does that mean for the sword? Does it mean the back left side of the weapon is physically heavier? Does it mean it operates differently in multidimensional space?
Well, you have to ask yourself, what is green?
Green is our true B literal. Back left green 4.
Exactly. Green represents a state of absolute Boolean truth on the diagonal axis. The presence of that 13 in the secondary binding structure implies a highly unstable or asymmetrical energy point in the physical framework.
Okay, so it's pulling everything toward it.
It suggests that the true B literal is acting as the keystone holding the entire holistic architecture together.
So the silence of the zeros isn't emptiness. It's a vacuum being pulled toward that massive spike on the green facet.
If that 13 were a 0, like the rest of the array, the secondary binding would have no anchor. The sword might simply fly apart into raw, unconnected logic. That 13 is the gravity well that allows the sword to exist.
Wow. Okay, so we have all of this underlying math. We have the genetic sequence of the weapon. But what does all this math mean when you actually look at the surface of the sword?
What happens when it turns on?
Exactly. What happens when these equations resolve? And this brings us to a massive section of the text known as eternal sovereign recursion.
If the arrays we just discussed are the hidden source code, the eternal sovereign recursion matrix is the monitor displaying the output.
I love that analogy.
It is the literal readout of the jewels on the hilt and the pommel based on their specific color groupings. It shows us how those internal weights, the white, black, brown, and double brown states, actually manifest on the surface of the weapon in real time.
And the data blocks in this section are huge. They are structured by 3 color anchor sets. For example, the very first block is dictated by yellow, red, and blue. If we map that back to our triad decoder, that means false A, false B, false C.
The absolute zero state.
And within that specific color state, the matrix maps the behavior of the 4 colored facets, red, blue, green, orange, across 4 specific physical orientations.
Those orientations are left hilt, which points left and upwards, right hilt pointing right and upwards, left pommel pointing left and downwards, and right pommel pointing right and downwards.
I want to explore specific output from this matrix so everyone can see how this machine actually operates.
Let's do it. Let's stay in the false state set, yellow, red, blue. Let's look at how the red facet behaves when it is physically oriented on the left hilt.
Okay, let me find that row in the text. Okay, it says, in the yellow, red, blue state, red left hilt outputs white, brown, black, brown. Or, in the symbolic language, white heart, brown heart, black heart, brown heart.
Now translate those symbols back to the states we just defined.
Okay, white is inverted 1, brown is unbound, black is orientation 0, brown is unbound again, so the output is inverted 1, unbound, orientation, or unbound.
Think about what that means physically.
Yeah.
That is a highly dynamic, erratic state. The geometric facet of the sword is flickering rapidly between inverted Boolean logic, unbound free energy, and solid 0 orientation before snapping back to unbound free energy. It is chaotic.
It's like watching a digital display glitching out, or a combination lock constantly spinning.
Exactly. Now, I want you to contrast that chaotic flickering state with a state that is heavily influenced by that mutated dampener we found earlier, the double brown.
Okay, let's jump down the matrix to find that. Let's look at the yellow, green, blue set.
Notice what changed. We replaced red with green.
Green, our true B-literal, the home of the massive 13 spike in the secondary binding structure.
Yes. Now, look at what happens to the green facet when it is oriented on the right pommel in this specific state.
Okay, let me track the row out. The output for yellow, green, blue on the green right pommel is double brown, double brown, double brown, double brown, 4 concentric circles.
Read the translation.
Secondary binding structure, secondary binding structure, secondary binding structure, secondary binding structure.
It is absolute binding.
The dampener has completely taken over.
The massive gravity of that 13 has asserted itself across the entire orientation. The jewel isn't flickering between chaotic states anymore. It isn't inverted. It isn't unbound. It is locked down in a solid, unyielding state of mathematical inertia.
If the previous state was a spinning combination lock, hitting 4 double browns on the right pommel is like hitting the jackpot on a slot machine. The bells ring, the lights freeze, and the entire system locks down.
That's a perfect visual.
Or maybe, given that we are talking about a weapon, it's like pulling an emergency brake on the universe. The blade suddenly becomes infinitely heavy, anchored in place by an insurmountable block of Boolean logic.
That is the essence of eternal sovereign recursion. The matrix shows us how the sword behaves dynamically when manipulated through physical space. The constant calculating shift between inverted, orientation, unbound, and secondary binding dictates the literal physical state of the weapon at any given multidimensional coordinate.
The sword is constantly recalculating its own existence.
Yes, millions of times a second.
That brings up a critical point, though. We are talking about the sword recalculating based on its orientation in space. But how does it move?
Right.
We aren't just watching a simulation run on a sterile computer screen. This is a blueprint for a conceptual sword. A sword implies a user. It is meant to be held.
It'd have to have an operator.
Exactly.
Right.
How does the user actually interface with this hyper-complex, recursively generating architecture?
We finally arrive at the literal physical grip of the user. The text transitions from abstract math to the human hand in a section titled The Story Plot Narrative.
And this is where the logic becomes mechanical movement. The source details specific physical contact points on the user's hand. I degree thumb knuckle squared, hand knuckles, finger knuckle squared.
It designates 4 precise physical points of contact on the human hand gripping the weapon. And it maps those 4 biological points directly to the mechanics of the grip, which, as it turns out, is not a solid piece of material, but a series of rotating rings.
Right. The text divides the grip into 2 main operational zones, the hilt ring encompassing positions 1 through 4, and the pommel ring encompassing positions 5 through 8.
This is where everything we have discussed, the triad decoder, the true and false edges, the complex network fundamental converges into human action. Let's verbally walk through what it physically feels like to operate this mechanism.
Let's break down the recursion of the hilt ring. Position 1 is listed as a sequence of 4 nodes: Slarnjörk, Vartis, Brilith, Loclaus.
Take a close look at those 4 names. Do you remember where they sit on the triad decoder?
Yeah, they are all true aliteral nodes. They represent the top half of the multidimensional compass. They all have purple in their DNA.
Exactly. When the hilt ring is in position 1, the Boolean logic is aligned in that specific sequence. Slarnjörk is dominant at the front of the sequence. But look what happens when the user's thumb knuckle physically rotates the ring from position 1 to position 2.
The text says the sequence shifts. It becomes Umbardus, Loclaz, Slarniok, Brailith.
The entire sequence mathematically stepped one position to the left.
Slarniok moved back, and Umvarnus took the dominant front position.
And when the thumb knuckle pushes the ring to position 3,
It shifts again. Loclaz, Brailith, Umbardus, Slarniok. And position 4 completes the cycle. Brailith, Slarniok, Loclaz, Umbardus. It is a continuous mechanical rotation of the mathematical variables.
and the pommel ring, governed by the lower knuckles, does the exact same thing with the false aliteral nodes.
The yellow nodes.
Right. Position 5 starts with the sharp true edge blade at the front. Yalex, Vadrant, Thadlario, Allegrex. Position 6 shifts the geometry, bringing Vadrant to the front. Vadrant, Allegrex, Yalex, Thadlario.
And positions 7 and 8 continue to mathematically cycle through the nodes until it returns to the beginning.
Exactly.
I want to make sure everyone listening can really visualize what is happening here. Picture a Rubik's Cube, but instead of a cube, it's a cylinder wrapped around the hilt of a sword.
That is the perfect way to imagine it.
Every time your thumb shifts a ring, you aren't just aligning colored plastic. You are physically rotating the Boolean logic of the universe. You are moving the node Slarnock to the front, pushing Loclaz to the back, and in doing so, you are shifting the entire mathematical sequence of the blade.
You are rearranging the tension lines. When you move DLX, the sharp edge, from position 5 to position 6, you are dragging the network bridges, the Zath line, the Voob line along with it.
The entire architecture responds.
The internal arrays we discussed, those localized weights of white, black, and double brown, recalculate instantly. The user isn't just swinging a piece of metal. They are piloting a multidimensional logic engine. Their thumb knuckle is manipulating the very equations that dictate reality.
It is the literal manifestation of eternal sovereign recursion, a closed loop that infinitely cycles through the Boolean states as the rings are turned, constantly rebuilding the physical form of the weapon in real time.
And this mechanical perfection touches on a philosophical underpinning subtly woven into systems like this. It is an expression of what classical thinkers might call adonde, the pursuit of absolute excellence or virtue, repeating infinitely. Arte again, agape.
Oh, wow.
When you build a system this flawless, where every single variable from the literal colors down to the localized weight of a secondary binding structure serves a vital, interconnected purpose, the act of operating it becomes an act of devotion.
It's recursive excellence.
Yes. The human hand turning the ring is participating in a mathematically perfect cycle.
Let's bring everyone back up for air for a second, because we have gone on an absolutely incredible journey here today. This document is just staggering.
It truly is. We started with an abstract concept, a 3-bit triad decoder, assigning simple true and false values to colors to generate geometric coordinates in a multi-dimensional space.
And then we watched those abstract coordinates physically manifest into the true and false edges of a conceptual sword, strung together by a complex transit map of tension bridges.
We dug into the genetic code, the mathematical arrays dictating the exact physical properties of the sword's facets, uncovering that massive reality-anchoring anomaly of the 13 spike in the secondary binding structure on the green V literal.
And finally, we saw how all of this hyperdense matrix logic is mechanically rotated, recalculated, and controlled by the physical knuckles of a user turning rings on the hilt.
It is a breathtaking architectural design.
And if you are listening to this, you might be asking yourself, this is fascinating, but why should I care about the multidimensional Boolean geometry of a conceptual sword? How does this apply to me?
It's a fair question.
And I'll tell you why it matters. Because it stretches the brain in ways we rarely allow it to stretch. It shows you how deeply disparate systems, color theory, binary math, physical architectural form, human spatial geometry, and even temporal orientation can be perfectly, seamlessly unified into a single holistic design.
Absolutely.
Once you see how this sword works, it changes how you look at the physical objects around you. When you pick up your phone or look at the structural supports of a bridge or even just turn a doorknob, you start wondering about the hidden logic, the unseen mathematical matrices, and true-false tension lines that might be governing their physical form.
It absolutely challenges our baseline perception of reality. It forces us to ask if physical form is just a localized expression of underlying truth values, and that leaves us with a rather profound, almost unsettling implication to consider as we wrap up.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if a mere weapon, an object simply meant to be held and swung, can be governed by an architecture this holistic, this deeply recursive, and this mathematically dense, what would the blueprint of the person meant to wield it look like?
Wow. That is a massive thought.
If you were to apply a 3-bit triad decoder to your own consciousness, mapping the variables of your own beliefs, your actions, your internal logic, what colors and multidimensional spatial coordinates would dictate your true edge?
That's incredible.
Where would your structural anomalies lie? Where is your 13 spike holding your secondary binding structure together? If this architecture can map a sword, it could theoretically map a soul. It is worth taking the time to imagine mapping your own reality into this elemental architecture.
I don't think I could have said it better. The next time you feel like you've hit a wall or you are looking at a chaotic situation, remember that the jagged line on the blueprint isn't just a break. Beneath the muddy waters, it is an entire universe of mathematically perfect intersections just waiting to be decoded. Until next time, keep diving deep.